Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. The theme for this afternoon's talk is the Buddha's teachings and how we can prepare children for living in the current age, or something of that nature. So this is a question of obviously great interest here at the Panyaden school, and the principles that the school is built upon, Buddhist principles, also principles of education of a holistic nature, taking into account the child's whole well-being. Something I feel a great deal of sympathy with, and feel very delighted to see all the work that's been going on here and the good people who constitute this place. Because of course the school is not so much the buildings as the people, and without the people you just got a bunch of buildings. These questions, these issues are very significant, and particularly considering the times that we live in. And here we are, 2014, and the world is a rapidly changing place. This is a cliche, I understand. This is something said over and over again, but it's also something that is sometimes difficult to get our minds around just how much the world is changing. A few months ago, I was reading a newspaper report about a public talk given in London by the author Neil Gaiman, who's a novelist, both with adults, books for adults like American Gods or children's books, the Graveyard Book, and it's well-known, much admired author. And it was a talk to support libraries and child literacy in Britain. And in that talk, he quoted a very startling statistic. A few days before, he said he'd been chatting with one of the vice presidents of Google Corporation, and the man from Google had been describing to him the nature of the sort of increase, the escalation in the information age. And the statistic was, and of course this is just a statistic, said between the dawn of civilization, about 15,000 years ago, and 2007, during that time, humanity created roughly 5 billion gigabytes of information. Every book written, every stone inscription, every newspaper published, every poem, put it all together and you get roughly, obviously, roughly 5 billion gigabytes of information. We now generate the same amount of information every 2 days. So the same amount of information that was created in 15,000 years is now generated every 2 days. And that was 6 months ago, so it's probably down to a day and a half now. So this is just a statistic, but if you consider 2007 was not a long time ago. And what it says is that the children who are in this school now, who are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 years old, the world that they are living in, and by the time they are adults and they're our kind of age, how much more information will they be challenged to process in the course of a day? How much a variety of stimulation is going to be available to them? So these kind of questions, I feel, are significant, and one of the main things I'm asked about, or people ask for opinion on, is what do I feel about children's use of technology, and children always on computer games or playing with iPads, iPhones and such. And you might think that this kind of thing is not an issue in the monastery, but I live at Amaro-10 Monastery in England, and very often families come to visit. Their mothers will be there with their children, and while the mums are sitting there kind of with their hands in Anjali and talking to me, or say joining in with the ceremonies, you'll have a line of 5, 6, 8, 10 kids all swiping their iPhones or their iPads, and with their mother out of the corner of her mouth trying to persuade them to, put their iPad away and pay attention. You even see smaller kids, so 1.5 and 2-year-olds, they'll pick up a book and start swiping the picture on the cover, trying to make the picture bigger or to move on to the next one, and or give them a calendar. And you can see for the kids, it's like, this iPad is broken, Mum. This is a useless iPad. It's not working. The picture won't do anything. Seriously, I kid you not. So even right in the monastery, this issue is before us. So I feel that many of the issues about difficulties with attention span for children, ADHD. I'm not an expert in this field by any means, but the diminishing attention span, children suffering from ADHD, attention deficit disorder, and say suffering from different conditions on the autistic spectrum. I feel a lot of it is heavily contributed to by the massive variety of distraction and availability of stimulation of different kinds that is available today. So I'm not a Luddite, I'm not going to anti-technology, but I certainly see that because that people can be so easily entertained with such a huge amount of variety, so colourful, so interesting, so compelling, that it's very hard to say to a kid, put that down, because what's going on in the room is much less interesting than what's going on in that little luminous rectangle, right? And it's not just a problem for the children. Some of you might even be itching to look at your iPhones right now. I'm not reading anybody's mind, don't worry. It's just statistics again. Even Buddhist monastics have been known to check their phones during Dhamma talks. Unfortunately, that's true. So these concerns, I feel, are very valid, and they need to be addressed. And I don't say that it's something that's I don't know how much of a problem it is here in Thailand, but certainly living in the USA, I was in California for about 15 years. It's almost in certain California schools, it goes without saying that most children are on some kind of medication for attention disorders or restlessness, that they're on Ritalin or other drugs. And I even heard a story. I don't know if this is directly true, but I was told on good authority, one little girl who was from an Asian background, that because she wasn't on medication, she didn't have any pills to take, she felt left out. So she was asking her mum for some pills so she could be like her friends at school. So that might be just a hearsay, but unfortunately it sounds very believable. So now the issues that we confront today, I'm not going to say that it's entirely due to technology and such like, but I feel it is generally it's a great difficulty, and that one of the things that I feel in a Buddhist school or an educational environment that is really important. And again, I'm trying not to say, so back in the old days, when I was a kid, we used to, because it's very easy to do that. But amongst the things I feel it's very important for us to be able to do as people, whether we're children or as adults, but particularly as children, is I feel we need to learn how to be unhappy. We need to learn how to be bored. Because now it's really hard for a child to be bored, because the sources of entertainment, well, it's hard for an adult to be bored, because the sources of distraction multiply every day. And so that part of our maturing as human beings is how we creatively use our time, how we deal with sadness, how we deal with loss. These are, you might think, well, this monk's a real crank. But I don't want to feel sadness, I don't want to feel loss, I don't want to be bored. Well, who would want that? But I feel that part of our maturing as human beings is learning how to deal with life's difficulties and to meet them and to understand. And if you are familiar with the Buddha's very first teaching, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the turning of the wheel of Dhamma, in that he describes that when he's explaining the Four Noble Truths, he said each of the four truths has a way that it needs to be worked with. And the first one, dukkha, the truth of dissatisfaction, unsatisfactoriness, suffering, he says, parinyayanti, dukkha needs to be apprehended, it needs to be met, it needs to be received. So there has to be that sense of, this is dukkha, this is the experience of dissatisfaction, this is what I'm feeling now. And one of the difficulties with education and preparing children for living in the 21st century is how to let them be able to meet dukkha. You know, obviously in a skillful way and ways that can be worked with, but when you have such a multitude of distractions. I was looking at an interview with an American author and a comedian, a social commentator, a man called Louis C.K. is the name he goes by. And it was a very interesting discussion because I think it was being interviewed by Conan O'Brien on American TV, so primetime TV in the US. And Conan O'Brien asked him, "Yeah, I understand that you don't let your teenage daughters have a phone. They're not allowed to use a phone." He said, "That's right. You know, I don't let them use a phone, a smartphone." And then the interviewer said, "Well, why is that?" And he told this interesting little story. He said, "Well, the other day I was driving down the highway, and this Bruce Springsteen song came on the radio, and it took me right back to being 16 years old at high school and how absolutely awful that was. I heard the song, it took me right back, and I just felt incredibly sad. I started crying, had to pull over onto the side of the road and have a really good weep into the steering wheel." And he said, "I want my daughters to be able to experience that. That was a horrible. My high school experience was really miserable. It was awful, but and then being reminded of it was a painful experience. But then it welled up. I felt it. It came to an end, and then I started the car up again, and I drove on." So I feel that as human beings, we need to be able to deal with those kinds of experience. If we only just push them away and distract ourselves, then we never learn how to grow up. We never learn how to digest heartbreak. We never learn how to use our time or our imagination. And so I felt a very powerful discussion, and also I thought, what a good father. So the interviewer, he was also somewhat playing what they call the devil's advocate. He said, "Well, don't your daughters say, 'Look, if you love me, Dad, you give me a smartphone'?" He says, "Yeah, they might feel like that, but they also know that because I love them, I don't give them a smartphone." And that's my love is expressed through saying, "No, you're 14, you're 15, not yet." And so I felt that expressed very clearly one of the things that it's important when we look at how we prepare our children, along with obviously letting them be in the modern age. You're not going to say you're banning them from using ballpoint pens or only using kind of organic hand-spun cotton clothing. We're not having to be fanatical about it, but to be thinking of ways that we can give them the space to be, say, facing those difficulties, the feelings of loss or heartbreak and sadness, also boredom. I feel I was having a conversation with our friends from Panyaden here, and I said, I think it's really important for kids to know how to be bored. He said, yes, please say that tomorrow, Ajahn. So I'm saying it too. Because I feel that when you're a child, and again, I don't want to sort of qualify, when I was a little kid, I did grow up on a farm, and me and my sisters, it was like, we'll go out and play, and then we'd be gone for the day, and we often play in the woods and making fortresses and damming streams and climbing trees and falling out of them occasionally. But you had to make your own. You had to make your own world. You had to make your own entertainment, and so that being bored then pushes you to use your imagination. It pushes you to draw upon your creative resources, and that one of the difficulties of having on the one hand, an enormous amount of distraction and stimulation available in computer games and various TV channels and all the variety of different possibilities available for younger people or older people, that we're not allowing ourselves to be bored. Yeah. Many people are multitasking. Not only are you on the phone, you're checking your messages while you're on the phone. I won't ask for a show of hands. How many have been having a phone call with someone and you're checking on your BlackBerry or your iPhone on the other line? We have no space in our days. I mean, I don't feel it's say anything kind of evil or terribly sort of badly intended in people, but just being carried along by the flow of the age, the flow of the time. That's what everybody's doing. It's normal. So you just do it. And so before we realize it, every corner of the day is filled up with stuff, with activity, with stimulation. One aspect of this then is that we're also creating an interest in the opposite. So as an alternative, I've noticed that, again, when I was visiting the States recently, I moved back to England about 4 years ago, but when I was visiting the monastery in California a while ago, I saw an advert for a local hotel. Very expensive, at least $800 a night, the cheapest room, and the selling point was no Wi-Fi, no cell phone reception, no TV in the room, no landline phone. You are alone, and it's going to cost you to be alone. And I thought, okay, well, it's a marketing ploy, but it's interesting that people, there is that kind of glut, sort of overfed. I can't get away from being socially mediarized. And it's just, I'm in contact with so many people all the time, everywhere, that there's this feeling of pressure and burden and just wanting some space. And so I thought, interesting, people pay $800 a night just to get away from being tweeted or texted or emailed or having Facebook access. That something in us, our own common sense, is also being brought into play. So I feel hopeful in that respect. One of the other issues that has come up in discussions, and it's also particularly to do with boredom, but also the way that people parent their children. Again, not harking too much on when I was a kid. You just sort of sent out to go play, and you could go play in the woods, or you get on the bike and go for a bike ride and come back 5 hours later. And my mother had no idea where I was. And the idea of wearing a helmet while you're on a bicycle was unheard of in those days. But so I do understand my own conditioning is to have very unstructured time. But again, when I went to live in the States, I was really startled how when the children, American teenagers, that every moment of their day, from before breakfast, is timetabled. So that school would begin at 8:30, but before school they'd have music class and a dance class. And then school began, and then after school you'd have sports or cheerleading, and then you'd have swimming. And then they finally get home by about 7 in the evening. Every day. It's like the whole day would be scheduled with stuff. And then, because I got quite friendly with a couple of American families and spent time in their homes, and I would say, oh, where's Josh gone? Or what's Sarah doing? I said, oh, she's at dance class, or he's at band practice, or he's with with the sports club. And not only during the term time, but during the holidays as well. That there was one summer camp after another, after another, after another. I thought, don't these kids ever get any time just to have an empty day to make up what they want to do for themselves? And again, I don't just tell people how to run their lives, but I do feel that there's a kind of reflex that happens, it's not just in the US, but sort of trickling through the world, whereby parents feel that they are being irresponsible if they're not providing all kinds of stuff for their children to do and to learn and to improve themselves through, every day. And that they're wasting time if they're not at a class, or they're not learning ballet, or they're not in band practice, or they're not on the sports field, or they're not in the drama group. And so I'd like to make I'd like to propose a round of applause for wasting time. Let us all now praise wasting time, and that at least once in a while you say to the kid, do whatever you like today, there's nothing structured, and that this is the empty day of the week, and let's do whatever you like, spend the time as you wish. Because again, it's all well intentioned. It's not like parents are plotting, how can we make our child miserable or kind of ruin them. No one thinks that way. Rather, we're trying to do what we can to help, but in that very effort to help, we end up creating a very unnurturing environment where the child has got so much stuff to do that's already laid out for them that they don't learn how to be bored. They don't learn how to imagine and to create their own worlds and to explore their own interests from within themselves, rather than one program after another, after another, after another. One of the things, as an alternative to filling our time with alternative technology, with IT and the electronic devices, and within the home. Again, I'm not going to tell you how to run your lives, but setting the home up so that the children, whether they're young kids or they're older or teenagers, that they have areas that are their own sort of creative space, so that where they can make a mess, where they can have boxes of dressing up clothes, they can kind of leave them on the floor, or they can have their painting surfaces, and they don't have to have everything spick and span and looking like better homes and gardens at the end of the day. I was being shown around Panyaden school, and very proudly being conducted through the art room, and the floor looks like a kind of major abstract expressionist piece. Probably could cut the floor out and sell it for $5 million in New York, the appropriate gallery. It's fantastic. I think more homes should have these kind of chaos-friendly areas where the kids can make their own world and can explore and play, and to have that sense of working with their hands, dressing up, making sculptures, playing games, and such. They're not having to say be handed programs, but they also can create things for themselves. In particular, also, I was speaking yesterday with someone talking about meditation for children, and that this is, I'm not sure how things are done here at Panyaden school, but spending time with children, even when they're quite small, there are various creative ways that we can encourage children to enjoy the beauties of stillness and silence. And even if it's just a simple meditation like, say, let's see if we can follow the sound into silence. And even a 2-year-old will... So, at that moment, even a 2 or a 3-year-old will be able to focus on a sound, get a nice bell with a sound that lasts a long time, and then you can do sort of bell meditation, ring the bell and just let the child listen. Meditation doesn't have to be mindfulness of breathing. You can be you can be creative in other ways, using a sound, or using a different forms of focusing. But it's also something that children can learn to love. Again, the person who was talking with me last night said that her little boy, her grandson said, "Granny, can we do that thing that we do with our minds?" That's a rough paraphrase. I can't remember the words exactly, but can we do that thing that we do with our minds? A little boy, 5, 6 years old, very could relate to. Let's sit down and be quiet. That's a fun thing to do. And so, being ready to make some space in the day, to sit, to be quiet, to be still, to let that be something that enters your life. Now, some of the questions earlier today, one of them was about, my child is hyperactive, or what can I do? Should I call the psychologist? Or often what happens is my child is getting in trouble at school. He's starting fights. He's very aggressive, and what can we do? Can you do something for him to make him okay? Can you teach him something? And usually I get in the position I have as a senior monk, as the abbot of a monastery that's visited by a lot of people. I get these kind of questions very, very regularly. And as is the case with many, many things, even though people send their kids to a school, and people here are paid to be school teachers, the main teachers are, in fact, the parents. I would suggest that children learn, they're eager to learn, and they learn from the people closest to them and dearest to them. So they learn from mum and dad. And so, if you want your child to be not so restless and agitated, then one of the things you need to do is to look at how you operate. And just to give an example of a family in England, and I said, so if you want your child to be calm, you need to pay attention to what you feel like. Are you stressed? What does your body feel like? When you're busy, when you're in an active situation, how do you feel? What's the sense of your body at that time? And then of course she started looking at the carpet. I said, because if you want your child to be calm and relaxed, then if you don't even know how to relax yourself, how can you expect the child to calm down? And so I wasn't trying to shame her or make her feel bad. I was just asking the question. And so I said, if you use the meditation yourself and you see what makes you agitated and makes you reactive or on a short fuse, and then you look at that, you reflect on it, you learn to see, well, if I catch my moods and I see what my mind is doing, getting busy, getting agitated, getting stressed, I say, okay, slow down. Now, let's breathe out. Okay. Ooh, my shoulders are up around my ears. Okay. My stomach is like a washboard. Okay. Now, with the body relaxed and the mind relaxed, okay, now's the time to say, Stevie, come here. We can calm down the child through being calm ourselves, because children, above all else, they learn by example. If, again, not trying to shame anyone or make people feel bad, but if your child has aggression problems and is assertive or attacking other children or having outbursts, it's good to see how does frustration get dealt with in your household. How often do voices get raised? Do the parents ever shout at each other? How do differences of opinion get resolved? And then again, when I say these kind of things, you find people looking at the carpet. Oh yeah, right. Because children learn from their environment, they learn from their parents, they learn from the people around them. I would say as much, if not more, than from the school. So that if we want our children to be peaceful and wise and calm, then it's a responsibility, but I feel that needs to be modelled and embodied in a genuine way in the parents first, before it's modelled in the child. Now, one of the old sayings they have in England is, "Don't do as I do, do as I say." Yes, precisely. That's the mudra. But it's unfortunately you do hear that. I don't know how it is in other countries, but probably most places they have that. Don't do as I do, do as I say. But that's not something you can really viably ask a child to go along with. It's like, how dare you? Because that arouses no respect or no empathy with the child. And far more, it's, I will do what you do. If it's okay for Daddy, then it's okay for me. And so the that kind of modelling and being ready to be a good example is important. There's a famous story of Mahatma Gandhi, when an Indian mother brought her young son to Gandhiji and said, "Oh, Gandhiji, my son is completely addicted to jalabis, this very super sweet Indian confectionery. My son is addicted to jalabi. He won't stop eating them. He goes into the larder, he steals them, and he won't stop asking for them all the time. Please, Gandhiji, please tell him. Please tell him to stop eating jalabis. It's no good for him, and it's going to make him very sick. And I'm really upset about it." And he said, "Well, come back in 3 days, and I'll talk to him about it." Oh, okay. So 3 days later, she came back with the boy again. And then she said, "So Gandhiji, could you please speak to my boy about jalabis?" He said, "Yes, little boy, you should listen to your mother, and you shouldn't eat jalabis. They're not very good for you, and maybe one a week is okay, but more than that, it's going to make you fat and going to make you ill. So please listen to your mother and stop eating so many jalabis, and definitely don't steal them from the larder." So his mum said, "Well, why didn't you say that to him 3 days ago?" He said, "Well, because I hadn't given them up then. I was still eating them every day. So I couldn't say to him, stop eating them if I was still eating them. So I had to wait till I'd stopped before I could say to him, you stop." So, I know we are not all Mahatma Gandhi and of that kind of spiritual strength, but I do feel that that's a really important principle for the adult population to take to heart, is that your children learn from the way you are, not what you tell them to do. You can quote me on that. So that's challenging, but also it's helpful, because if you want your child to be more calm, you want your child to be more honest and polite, then we need to model that as adults, because we will be the form that they build their being around. One of the other things that I feel is an important issue is, again, what's happened nowadays is that there's a kind of abdication, if you know that word, a stepping down of the parent from this kind of role of being a teacher and a mentor for the child. You send your child to the school, so the school teachers teach the child. Or you send the child to the psychologist, so the psychologist will solve the child's problems. I did a degree in psychology, so I'm not biased against psychologists. And so it's not that school teachers are bad, but I feel that another of the things of preparing a child for growing up and living in the 21st century is what I feel you can call intergenerational learning. So that along with the parents being modelling behaviours, I feel there's an awful lot of learning that can go on in the home that doesn't go on now, because people send their children to the arts and crafts classes. They send them to the school. They want the school teachers to do the teaching, or they send them to the psychologists to kind of sort their minds out. Whereas I feel that what's happening is that children are being turned into a whole different species. They're a different group, and it's more prominent in the West. But children are kind of made into a different animal altogether. And there's the parents' world, there's the childhood, there's children's TV, there's teenagers' TV, there's parents' TV, and the parents' world doesn't touch the teenagers' world doesn't touch the little kids' world, and that one of the signs of human well-being, or the aspects of human well-being, is intergenerational learning. So not just the parents also spending time to teach the kids the sort of the arts and crafts, or the skills that they know, but also the between children, like the elder children teaching the younger children, or the younger children learning things from the grandparents. That it's not so prominent here in Thailand, but I can see it's drifting in this way. In the West, particularly in the USA, it's like they're whole different universes. That they don't touch each other, and that around the cities, like somewhere like San Francisco, you almost hardly see anybody on the street that's sort of younger than 19 or older than 65. Old people are not around, and the young people are not around. So adult life is on the street, or the sort of competent, independent adults. Everyone else is the old people are in homes, and that the kids are off in school or doing other things. Other cultures, I feel, here in Thailand, you see much more old generations out on the street and living together. I was just in Israel for a couple of weeks before coming here. That's much more of a spread between the oldest and the youngest. Japan also, there's a big spread, but I feel there's a drift whereby the society is getting sectioned out, and there's sort of things for children, and that's over there, and they're all sort of being compartmentalized. And personally, I feel there's a lot that's lost in that intergenerational mixing, and that parents spending time and being friends with their little children, teenagers being friends and spending time with their younger siblings, teenagers spending time with their grandparents. The current of the age does not support that, but I feel more ways that we can be together and spend time and learn from each other, and have support that intergenerational exchange is very, very significant. One of the other aspects that I also feel is significant, and I'll finish with this. It's the what you can call the kind of group intelligence of a family. That when you divide people off from each other, then the children's world is separate from the adult's world, then and we're all kind of in our own little compartments. In a way that the spirit of the family is really lost. I mean, you might again be meaning very well, but there's a quality, and also within a school, rather than the children being divided up into 8 particular age groups and subjects, that when the generations mix, there's a great strength in that. There's one of the first alternative schools in Britain, Bedales, was the very first co-educational boarding school with both boys and girls boarding together. I used to teach there. I was invited to go and be at Bedales a couple of times, and my job was not to go into any classrooms, but to sit under a tree and be available for people to come and talk to me. That was my job for a week. I did that twice in the early 80s. And in Bedales, what they do is that it's a boarding school, and so in the dormitories, they'll have a dormitory with like 4 boys or 4 girls in one room, and you'll have an 18-year-old girl, a 16-year-old girl, an 11-year-old girl, and a 10-year-old. And they're all in the same room together. So they share a living space with each other. And even though their interests are very, very different, there's a natural mentoring that starts to occur, and a connection across the age. And so that that kind of cross-generational mixing, it helps to form a great spirit. And in classes, I was speaking earlier today with some of the Panyaden people, how along with, because within schools, there's more and more of an emphasis on individual performance, right? What marks did you get? Where did you come in the exam? What was your performance? And yet, part of what is really enriching in life is how we collaborate with others. So the school that I went to, the kind of schools, they had a big emphasis on sports, and so team spirit and working together as a team was a big feature on the sports field. But outside that, it was kind of lost. In my experience of being in the Sangha, the monastic community, it's very much about the communal intelligence, like the spirit of the group, and what you learn from each other by living together with people that you would not necessarily choose as your friends. But you live together and you work together, and there's a strength, there's a spirit and an energy, an intelligence that the group has together. And one of the things I feel for children as they grow up is to not let their focus be on individual performance. Obviously there's a loss in that, and that the beauty of working together, developing as a team, and in a sense putting aside your individual performance or as being most significant, and instead think, well, how do we do as a group? How are we as a group? What's the benefits and blessings of us working together as a group? Just to finish with, when living in the States, I remember reading a little piece written by a man from the Iroquois Native American people, and he was talking about competition, and he said, you know, as young kids, young lads, you know, we would have races for sure, you know, and you know, you run as fast as you can, because you know if you come first, the girls are going to look at you, they're not going to look at the guy who came fifth. So you run fast because you know you want the girls to look at you. But he said you run as fast as you can, but when you win, you don't think, look at me, look what I did. You are what you think is, wow, what great parents I had, what great grandparents I had, what great grandparents I had. Now I couldn't run this fast without all my relations, without all of my ancestors. So it's my ancestors that I brought with me that have enabled this performance to happen. And I thought, well, that's very skillful, because it's so easily nowadays things get made so personal, like I'm the one that's achieved this, this is me, I've done it, look at me, I'm the winner, I've got it right, and it's all me, I've done it. And what's called the cult of the individual. And I feel the more that things drift in that direction, then the more we lose as human beings. And that by, in a sense, cultivating our own excellence, but cultivating it within the context of the group and putting the well-being of the group and the spirit of the group first, then we become far more completely grow up as well-rounded human beings in a much better way than when all the focus is on my performance and me being better than you. Because even though we might come first, it can end up being a very, very lonely existence and very fragile. So these are some thoughts and reflections that I'd like to offer on this occasion, and happy to open things up for some questions. And I think Neil
around,
let's ask from the floor,
or we can just pass the mic around if anybody wants to raise their hand. I do have. Anybody like to ask a question?
Motivation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Motivating a child who's bored by school, that doesn't unfortunately come to this school, is going to a Thai school, bilingual school, and regimented, demotivated. At the same time, tremendous peer pressure to keep up with the Joneses, who were to keep up with her classmates who've all got iPads, who've all got mobile phones. It's like a social disease, and I'm talking about a 9-year-old. What skillful advice would you give to a 9-year-old when we don't personally? This is a personal family problem I have. I'm sharing with you just to see if you can give insight. We don't want to get her into the mobile technology disability just yet, like Louis C.K. We don't think it's quite right. But we're facing really quite a lot of pressure, and it's coming from the child. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you have any skillful advice. Thank you.
Well, it's a very good question, and unfortunately you're not alone. In a way, I don't think it is coming from the child. I think it's coming from her environment, the school environment that she's in. And as a kid, you want to belong. It's not about the iPad, because 50 years ago it would have been something else. It would be about bobby socks. What kind of bobby socks are you wearing? Oh, you're not still wearing white ones, are you? Oh man, that's so 1948. It's about belonging, and so it's difficult to get that concept across to a 9-year-old. Yeah, but I understand that, Dad, but I want one. And I can't make your decisions for you, but I would recognise that that's the environment speaking. It's not really your daughter so much. She's affected. Those are the insignia of belonging in that place. And if she's the only one who's different, that's going to be hard to work with. And you have to make your own decisions. And I know there's quite a few families I've known in Britain or in the States where they did have that. This house has no TV. And so then they find that their kid is spending a lot of time over at Susie's. Because Susie's got a TV, but they hold to it steadily and carefully hold to a standard and explain it and explain the background to it to the extent that they can. But also, I think helping to provide another world that the child lives in as well, so that the world of their school friends is not their only world. And so if there's other groups that she can function in, like if there's a musical group or a dance group or art classes at Panyaden, or really just finding other ways of spending time, so that she doesn't just have mum and dad and then school, but there's other things she participates in whereby those other things are not they're not dominant. So that, okay, it's kind of weird and difficult at school, but there's this other stuff that I do, there's other things I'm involved in that I really enjoy and is more important to me. So you're providing an alternative, because you can't just say no IT. You've got to also say, here, let's make an art room. Here are the paints. Here's the modelling clay. I've got my friend in who's a puppeteer. Let's do some of this. So that you're actually handing something instead, rather than just saying no. And my experience as an abbot is when people are very often asking for things, if you say no, there's stress in the system. If you say, let me think about it, or how about this instead, it gets much easier. But just to say no, you can't, then all people experience is a lack, an absence. But if you say, well, how about this, let's do this, and you offer them something that's exciting, that's interesting, but also draws upon some of those other qualities, particularly their own creativity and physical engagement, like sports or dancing or acting, then those kind of things can really be like a whole opening up of other possibilities. I wish you luck anyway.
What do you say to parents? You say that they try to give their kids a lot of extra activities besides class, and they say that they have to do that because there's a lot of distraction for the kids, and if they don't provide them with these activities, the kids will go to some things that they don't like the kids to do. So they have already selected the best thing for them. What will you say to these parents?
That's a good question. I think you have to find a balance between both structuring the time, and then, like I was saying to our friend there, how you presenting possibilities that are a bit more wholesome. Because if you say, well, if I don't create a program for the kid, then he's going to be just spending all the time playing computer games with his friends. Then you create some other opportunities, or look into finding other ways that are engaging and are interesting. And particularly, I feel like with physical engagement, because the more that people get involved in IT and that realm, the more that the body is just the kind of thing that keeps your chin from dragging along the ground. You know, we are not getting much physical exercise or physical involvement. So certainly within Britain and the US, illness and obesity in young children is rapidly increasing, and a lot of it's because kids are spending so much time with computer games and their iPads and such. So if you are going to steer towards some extra activities, then you try to use some skillful ones. But I know it's an uphill struggle. But sometimes that the basic practice of, like I was saying to you, one mother who's got a very hyperactive child, say, okay, mom, you better go to the gym, because your kid won't stop. Okay, you better keep going with him. Go to the gym with him, go swimming with him, go climbing, go mountain climbing with him. You go out with him, because just to say, stay home and calm down, it's not going to work. So that kind of, for the parents to have more of a readiness to engage, and also to help the child to, say, be using games and skills and sports that help them to physically develop and also mentally develop is going to be helpful. But you have to also within that to find things that are, say, also challenging, like going out camping or going out into the mountains, where it is a long walk. It is going to take another 3 hours to get there. No, you can't speed it up. It's going to take time. So, like I said, oh, this is really boring, Dad. Yes, but we've still got another 10 kilometers to go, and no, there's no pickup. we've got to walk, and then that kind of situation where you are, even though they sort of grumble and go, oh, I don't like it, I don't want to do this. Oftentimes afterwards, they'll say, well, that was cool. Or they say, hey, my mom, she dragged me out for like a 15-kilometer walk. Can you believe it? Yeah, and that it's something that in a way they feel forced to do, but also it's also kind of an achievement. Like 15 kilometers. Like, no, you didn't, did you? Yeah, it was miles and miles and miles. So that the children are being tested and having to draw on their resources, and not just in how big a score they can get on a computer game, but in learning to stretch themselves in terms of creativity, in terms of physical exercise, and so on. So, but every family has to find a way of exploring that balance. Okay, maybe one more.
You've mentioned a few times in your talk the term skillful means, and I'm aware it's used as a Buddhist term or in Dhamma talk. And I'm wondering if you could please elaborate a little bit on how that relates to elements such as the teenager that wins the race and gives responsibility and credit to past generations versus the one that says, I'm the one who won, it's me. How is one more skillful than the other from a Buddhist perspective?
Well, the short answer is that the one who's recognizing that there's a contribution of others is seeing things in terms of nature or anatta, not self, whereas the other is is building up a sense of self, or sakaya ditthi, self-view around that. Yeah. Look at me, I'm the one. That's in a way a classic way of stating self-view, or sakaya ditthi, and so that a skillful means would be to highlight, that well, yes, you won the race, but if you hadn't had that, your parents, you wouldn't be here. If you hadn't had that food to eat, and the people who grew the food or who prepared the food, then you wouldn't have had the energy to run. And so, it's not just you as an individual person, but what you are is a confluence of many, many factors, so that it will be helping the person to see things in terms of nature, in terms of not self.